I don't have the dance moves that you do, so that's a lot.
Who's nervous? You? Maybe it's because the interpreter. Sometimes interpreters make people nervous.
It could be a lot of different things. Okay, so first question. When I was in high school, we had the option of taking Spanish or French as our required foreign language. Those are two very widely spoken languages, but more options really would have been nice to consider as a high school student. Thankfully, opportunities continue to expand for students, especially here in Bethel. Not only do we offer Spanish and French, but we also have German, Japanese, and American Sign Language. Rainey, that's where you come in. I've actually wanted to interview you since you spoke at the board meeting this summer about the new American Sign Language curriculum here at Bethel High School and throughout our district. Tell us about that process and what benefits this new curriculum offers students over the old 1990s curriculum it replaced.
Well, where to begin? So it actually started with all of us teachers in Bethel District piloting the program, which means that we took a little bit of the program and implemented it into one, maybe two of our classes each, just so that we could get a feel for it as teachers, decide what we liked about it, what we didn't, and then also the students got to see it and we got to see their feedback and response. We unanimously loved it. Specifically, the equity part of it. We loved being able to see the diversity, not only in race, but in experience, in deafness, in age. That was incredible. We finished piloting it and then adopted it this year. And then so far this year, it has been a roller coaster of emotions. Adopting something new means that there's a lot of technical difficulties happening, and so it kind of sets us off a little sometimes, but seeing how the kids are responding to the videos and knowing that it's integrated into Canvas already for us as teachers has been amazing so far.
That's fantastic, and thanks for your honesty about it being a roller coaster. And for your gestures, we actually are videotaping this segment of the show because you have a special guest with us. Would you like to introduce her?
Yes, this is my friend, Amy Kimmel, and we're very excited to have her. She is actually one of Bethel's parents and has lived in the area and taught in the area and signed in the area for a while now, and so we wanted to bring her in to show her off, basically.
I do have some questions for you as well, Amy. Let's just start with, for both of you, and I'm going to just go right across here. So, Rainey, when did you first learn American Sign Language and why?
So I first learned it when I was about 7. It was actually because my grandmother was a nurse and was caregiving for a young boy who was mute. So it actually wasn't related to deafness when I first was introduced to ASL. But I kept going, and then later I got introduced to our local deaf community and just started picking it up really fast. Became friends with a lot in our deaf community around my age and a lot of grandmothers. And then kept going in high school, kept going in college, wanted to become an interpreter, got nervous and stopped. And here we are teaching.
I'm glad you mentioned interpreters. There's one actually right behind me, and he's, I think, just slightly off camera, but he's here to interpret for you, Amy, so we're going to be able to hear what you are signing. Would you want to face the camera while you sign? What would be the most natural for viewers?
It actually might be better if the interpreter's over there to answer the questions, and that way I'd be looking more at the camera.
Perfect.
It really kind of depends.
Okay, so let's have you just move over to here, and I'm going to move with the microphone, and I'll be back. I'm glad you mentioned interpreters, Rainey. There's one standing behind me. Now he's actually over by the camera, so we can showcase Amy, and we can actually see what she is saying, and we'll be hearing the voice of our interpreter here. So, Amy, when did you first learn American Sign Language?
I first learned ASL, I think I was about 2.5, 3. That was in California. That was actually not here. I was born and raised in LA, California. So my mom had taken me to a clinic, and they did some testing, and they found out that I was deaf. And then there was a school nearby that had a DHH program, which is Deaf and Hard of Hearing program, and graduated through that program. And that's where I started to learn ASL. And it took from there all the way to the end, and here we are today.
So you learned ASL in California, and we're in Washington now. One thing that I had emailed you about, Rainey, as we were getting ready to do this, and you actually talked about it at the school board meeting, was the idea of regional dialects in sign language. And that's something I don't think a lot of people that can hear think about. I know I didn't. And you also talked about slang. So when I asked this question to you and said I'd like to talk about that, that's when you tagged in Amy. Would you like to kind of set us up here a little bit, and we'll talk first about regional dialects, and then let's venture into slang a little bit.
Sounds good. So yeah, one thing that is just like debunking the myth right now is ASL is not universal. And that's something that I still have students think all the time. It is not universal. So just like we have English and Spanish and German and Italian, we have sign languages for all of that. And by we, I mean the deaf community and populations as a whole. But specifically, we do have like national dialects, the same way that you would say like you have a Southern drawl, or you have that New York speed, or, you know, just those different little accents. We have that in sign language, and we see it a lot in sign language. So we see just like maybe the way your hands don't fully form a word, or maybe the way that your hands drop off, or the speed in which you sign, or how big you sign. So different things like that show kind of that dialect and that little bit of regional differences. And then one thing specifically, which I had mentioned at that school board meeting, was the difference between East Coast and West Coast signing, because True Way does actually, which is our new curriculum, does actually do a lot more East Coast signing because that's where it was developed, but it has enough variations that we here on the West Coast can adapt them as teachers, and then our students kind of get to see that there are two different dialects for each vocabulary. So it kind of opens their mind up to that idea that ASL is not just a one-size-fits-all.
Well said. That was really good. I'm going to step off camera now, and we're going to pose a similar question to Amy. Is there anything that Rainey left off here that you'd like to add? And then could you show us some examples of some of that regional dialect, some of the differences?
Yes, I can. One that I've got in my head is the word strawberry. For many years, I used this sign for strawberry. I moved here to Washington State, and it's very different. Here, they sign red and the same sign for fox, which together means strawberry. And so, being that I have a deaf son, having to introduce some of those different dialects and having to introduce what strawberry was here so he could be able to use that sign culturally in the area, but also to be able to teach some of the other deaf in the area what I as a mom signed growing up for the sign of strawberry.
I know a lot of listeners are going to find that very interesting. The regional dialects is something is something that people who can hear don't necessarily think about when it comes to ASL. I know I didn't. Now, when I was learning Spanish, the first thing we wanted to learn was the bad words from our teacher. Of course, it was in middle school. We're not going to give you any bad words in sign language today. We're not going to give you any bad words in ASL today, but we are going to talk about some slang. Now, Amy, I'm not sure how hip you are with the kids on the street these days, but I know you do have some kids. And
I work at an elementary school. I've got a little bit of hipness left in me, and I'm a mother of 4 kids and a grandma. I still got it.
I love it. You're perfect for this. So if you could show us just a little bit of slang that the kids are using, that you use, some things that, anything really that you think would be interesting for people to know.
New slang. So what a common sign is actually here is this sign champ, or a sign train gone. What was the other one that I was thinking of? This sign, which is translated as pie pie, but the difference between these signs is that they don't have a direct English translation for those signs. There's an understanding of what those signs mean, like the signs for an expert or things like that. It's so signing like the word champ. Sometimes that's meaning that you're an expert at something, that it's the best you've ever seen, like there's nothing that compares to it. Sometimes it's those words that relate to a feeling, and there's not really an English explanation for those words. And sometimes it's the way that that sign looks that there's not an explanation, that it's that emphasis of the language visually to understand the meaning behind it.
I'm going to step back over here. I'm going to ask you the question first, and then I'd like you, Amy, to add on anything that she misses. I love slang words in any language. A lot of people might not know that ASL is a newer language with roots in the early 1800s. Change is obviously a part of any language, even English. New words are added to dictionaries every year. Is this similar for ASL? I've read that the sign for computers changed recently. Can you talk us through what's new in American Sign Language right now, and how fast does it change?
Yeah, so it's interesting that you bring up computers because that changed a little while ago. You're older than me. But when computers changed, right.
Computer.
Right, there's different signs for computer. So computers changed, but really some of the words that I think of that have changed even more recently, that like from when I started learning to now are different, are social medias. And that's because of how fast they change. So for example, TikTok. I didn't know what the sign for TikTok was. And so I had to video call one of my high school friends to ask, what's the sign for TikTok? And then I showed it to my students. I just literally was like, hey, can I show you to my students? And she was like, yeah. And I flipped her and I was like, here she is. She's one of my deaf friends at high school. She's in class right now. She's going to show you the sign for TikTok, because I didn't know it. And so that was the same for Snapchat, for Instagram back when it first was a thing. For Facebook, people still have different signs for Facebook. So there's different things that are catching up with like social media and like text lingo and technology. I think that technology is its own beast of a language, just like it is in English, how there's like all of these tech-specific words. That's very similar in sign language. There's very similar tech-specific acronyms, and they use classifiers, which aren't really words. It's just the way that the pieces of the computer look. So like if you went into a programming class or a computer building class, they would just be talking about these little shapes and things, but they know what they're talking about because in context it makes sense. But to an outsider, you're looking going, you just signed square. What? But then they know what they're talking about. So it does change. It does change and evolve similar to English, yeah.
Before we kick it over to Amy and ask about some non-social media words, you said there were multiple signs for Facebook. Can you show us a few of those?
Sure. So some of my older friends that are deaf that are more English-based will sign Facebook, like literally your face and a book. But then a lot of people who are more hip sign Facebook, which is just FB for Facebook.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting.
They also have Facebook, where you're like signing a book on the side of your face. It's a face and a book with an F. It's Facebook.
Is that hip?
Yes.
No. Because you use it?
My in-laws, they use it. The group that graduated with them, they all use it.
Amy, without going down the social media rabbit hole, which Brainy just did, what are some other words that have changed recently besides computer, which apparently was a long time ago?
So what we've been focusing on a lot is learning to do new hand shapes for the last several years. And some of those, like for the example, the sign or the number for 3. So it could be 3 people. It could be 3 people walking in. It could be a car that's driving up and down a hilly road or driving back and forth on a side winding road. It could be a sign this way that's the 3 of us. So it's identifying and signifying a group of the 3 of us. So starting to develop more about how classifiers can be used in the deaf community. The similar to that would be like the sign B itself, being able to sign it for a wall, being able to sign it for a box. So it's learning in that way. It's a little bit different. It's more fun, but it's understanding a lot more of the linguistical aspect of the language. Like even the sign for 5, using it for the sign of what, or using it for different classifiers in those situations. And it's helped with the students to understand a whole lot better how to use the language and to use the language more fluently and become more fluent users of the language.
Amy, I just wanted to follow up on something you mentioned earlier, and I think it was you. You mentioned the use of facial expressions as part of the signing. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes. Facial expressions are very important. You can't say with a frowny face that I'm happy. You can't do that. It doesn't work. And you can't smile and say, I'm mad, because those two contradict each other. So it's not just the visual sign of the hands, but it's also the face that gives that emotion and or that feeling, whether it be that someone's happy or that they need to fix something. But it's that interaction that includes the body language, that includes the face, that includes your eyebrows, the way you move up and down, the way your cheeks are, the way your mouth movements are. There are a lot of different things that are involved in the language itself. Like, for example, if you go out into a community and you notice that there's a deaf person, you'll see that they are analyzing A to Z, head to toe, what that person is doing. And you're watching the way that they're moving. Is that a hearing person? Is that a deaf person? Are they actually signing? Oh, if they're actually signing, like for me, I go up and I talk to them. And I go introduce myself. I just kind of say, hey, I'm one of you guys. So one thing that we were just actually talking about is that when it comes to ASL, 80% of the language is actually nonverbal. It's in your facial expressions, it's in the body language, it's in the way you're moving. The word itself is only about 20% of the signs that you're using, but the facial expressions that go along with it are what identify where you're talking. And it's not one of those things that it's like, oh, it's just such an easy language to learn. To become fluent in the language, you need to actually understand all of the language.
Wow. Okay, that's something I didn't know. I assumed it was memorizing a lot of different hand gestures and things and some, but
one important thing is the receptive skills. So being able to actually see, yes, you can learn the book, you can learn the signs, but are you able to read the sign visually and understand a deaf person?
wow. There's a lot more that goes.
That's the big question, really, is are you able to actually not just portray the language and present the language, but are you able to, in return, to understand the language?
Absolutely. Wow.
And sometimes it can cause a lot of issues, and sometimes it can cause issues with the interpreters.
Was that directed at you?
Ish. He knows. He's in the deaf community, so he knows. He's fine. But at the same time, there are some interpreters out there that need more training, that need more experience in their receptive skills to be able to actually interact with more deaf that are in the community. Like between her and I, we can sign, and we can sign to each other, but at the same time, out in the community, there are different levels of sign. Like when I'm at school and I'm working with elementary kids, and so they're just learning and developing the language, so the level that I use to sign with them is completely different than a level that I'd use to sign with an interpreter, or than a level I'd use to sign here.
Yeah, and one more.
Especially in the medical field. The medical field is one that it changes completely because there's a lot of frustration with that. There's a lot of frustration in the community of those who are interpreters that don't understand the clients that they're working with.
And you would think, given the legal implications of medicine, that would be something they would be trained even more for, because I'm sure that would create a lot of issues.
Yes, and one of the big barriers in the medical field actually is getting the interpreter. There are a lot of times that you have to have someone who knows at least a little bit in the deaf community, who is willing to combat for a deaf person, who is willing to fight for their need for an interpreter in the medical situation.
That brings us to a really good question that I wrote a few weeks ago before we set this up. Your students here, Rainey, what are the benefits of learning ASL? We just heard one of them. Let's talk about that. And then to the larger extent, what's the benefit of being bilingual?
Yeah, so for ASL students, piggybacking off of something that Amy just said, and then I promise it will connect. I tell my students all the time that I've been signing since I was young, and I still get in a group of deaf people, and I'm like, what is happening? Because it is just like the next level of language. And I think it's amazing. We're always still learning. And so I tell my students it's very important that when you're going out there, especially as baby signers, as brand new little baby signers, that you are humble and respectful of the deaf community. So when they give you a new sign or they tell you, hey, that's not okay, you just accept. You accept because you are wanting to be a part of their world. And so you need to accept it to be in there. So going along with that, one of the benefits of my kids learning sign language is that they can go out in the world and then become a part of the deaf world and be connecting pieces so that deaf people feel like, hey, that person that works at Starbucks knows how to sign. That person in the drive-thru at McDonald's knows how to sign. And they feel seen and they feel a part of a bigger community of people. And I think that's really important. Really, in high school, my goal as a teacher is to make sure that these kids come out being good humans. That's what I tell them. And so if I can send one out and they are a kind human and they are willing to help with accessibility when possible and they are willing to advocate for people and empathize with people and understand that everyone is different, but everyone has the same right to communication and to friendship and to relationships and human interaction, then I've done my job.
Wow. And that's a big job. And thank you for doing it. I just have a question.
Nope. I actually want to relate something to what she just said.
Absolutely.
So I don't think you actually know this yet, but last July I went to a gas station. I also went to Starbucks. They're right next to each other. So I got to the Starbucks and I went through the drive-thru and I had my text ready and the woman asked if I was deaf and I said, yeah. And she said, go ahead and sign your order. And so I looked at the camera and I went ahead and signed my order. And they asked how your day was and we had this good interaction. It was only like 2 minutes long. I got my coffee and I was like, whoa, wow, that's new. And so being that I was there at Starbucks, it was really impressive to see that they had a person who actually had the receptive skills for that. But also, when I was at the gas station, there was a worker there at the gas station. So I got through the Starbucks and I went to the gas station. And the worker there noticed that I was signing on FaceTime. And he looked at me and he signed, what number are you on? And so I went ahead and paid for it. And I was like, I have been here for a few years and this is the first time that people are actually signing to me. I've had 2 places that I've gone in the last 10 minutes that both people are signing to me. And the inclusion was huge. And we are still slowly as a culture and as a community getting there. We're still building the bridges and connecting the gaps that are there in communication and interaction. My son is deaf. My 4th son is deaf. And I have hope that he's growing into this world and this world is going to be more encouraging and more accepting and more inclusive of him as he gets older.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. That's amazing. I thought the gas station story was going to go a totally different way because I've heard some horrific gas station stories around here. What is the one?
It ties in. It ties in. And she's helping to build those bridges. She's actually helping to bridge those gaps, to be that community advocate. And sometimes it's just that simple interaction back and forth, whether it's, like my experience at Starbucks and the gas station. It happens all the time, but it was amazing to see those interactions becoming life.
Amy, what is something that you wish everyone knew about ASL that would help us keep moving forward?
That's really hard. It's fun.
No, it's not hard.
It's not hard? I missed the not hard. It's not that hard. Let me say it that way. It does take a little bit of time every day. It doesn't take a 24-hour period. It doesn't take up all of your day doing it, but it does take time to develop those skills. And anyone can sign. Anyone can. And those who are here, they can sign. It just takes the time.
That's great. Same question for you, Rainey. What's the one thing you wish everyone knew about ASL?
I know. I'm trying to sift through and pick the most important because you sent me those questions and I looked at them and forgot.
Of course.
The one thing that I wish everyone knew about sign language is that, similar to Amy, it's not hard to learn, but it's not just English. I think that's very important. I get a lot of students who come in here because they're lazy and they want an easy A and they say, oh, it's English with my hands. And I go, get out, because it's not. It is not just English. It is beautiful and rich with culture and all of the things that we just barely touched the surface of today in today's podcast episode, that I want people to know that there's a lot to learn there. And what's interesting about deaf culture is deaf people are always the last to leave. Like, that was literally, me and Amy actually met at a football game, and everyone left, and we were still in the gate. We were the last two to leave the gate. We still were in the parking lot. Everyone left. We were the last two to leave the parking lot, and we were laughing because it's just a part of deaf culture, is like, you're always last to leave, because deaf culture includes storytelling, and it includes just like going on and on and on. And so I love that this was such a cool opportunity to get ASL exposure and deaf culture exposure. But definitely there is a lot more to go into in the future. And so I hope that our students want to continue to learn, and that if they ever meet someone in the deaf community, that they just go up to them and say, hey, I'm learning ASL. Let's chat. And they just want to learn. They want to learn about them as people, and they want to learn about their culture and language.
I would like to add something as well. I'm not sure if you know or not. Thank you for putting me over here. So I work at the school, and I teach people sign. We have a morning assembly every morning, and we have one sign of the day every single morning. We review all those signs on Friday. It is school-wide. It includes teachers, it includes students, it includes parents. So we are in the process of seeing the language develop for the school and the language develop for the community. And it's sad that I've only seen a small percentage, and there's only a small percentage of the school and the students that actually interact with those in the Deaf Ed program. So I'm hoping that through this, it also enables them to be able to have that interaction, to be able not to have the fear to go up and interact with deaf people, but to be able to actually incorporate them in the community. Starting now. So if you're wanting to learn sign and you don't know where to start with one sign. Do it every day. You can set up a gig. You can.
And Instagram. You should do a sign a day. Instagram.
A sign a day. Nope. There's already deaf social media influencers that are out there that are doing this. So please make sure that whoever the person is that you're following is a deaf person and not just a hearing person learning sign. There are several that are on both sides for just getting clout, just getting those views, but get the information from somebody who is deaf.
I back that as a hearing teacher. I teach ASL, but I did clarify and verify with my deaf grandmas and grandpas before I started this gig, and I do check in with them regularly because it is very important that you're learning from a native person, a native speaker, and giving them that space and that platform. So I'm here as a deaf advocate and a deaf friend, which is another reason we brought Amy here today, so that it wasn't just me representing a community that I'm not actually a member of, but I am definitely an advocate and supporter of.
Absolutely, and thank you for doing that. And
you're also in the deaf community in the role that you have. You're in the deaf community, so you also have that. You have that blessing to teach.
Oh, I love that. I know one sign, and hopefully it hasn't changed since computer did, but is this still thank you?
Yes, perfect.
Thank you, Amy, for being here today, and
You're
thank you,
welcome.
Rainey. I appreciate both of you very much.